The text message lit up my phone at 3 a.m. Sign the divorce papers tomorrow. No property claims, no alimony. Take it or I'll make you regret ever meeting me. I stared at the screen, my hands steady despite the late hour. After 15 years of marriage, this was James' idea of an ending. A threatening text message while he lay in bed with his mistress. My name is Olivia, and at 42, I never expected to be starting over. But here I was sitting in my home office surrounded by the evidence of my husband's betrayal, carefully collected over the past year. I typed back a simple response, check your email. Within minutes, my phone exploded with calls. I let them go to voicemail, each one more desperate than the last. James's voice grew increasingly panicked as he realized what I'd sent him. Dozens of videos from our home security system, all carefully timestamped and archived. Olivia, pick up the damn phone. He shouted in his latest message. You had no right to record private conversations. But I did have the right. It was my security system, installed in my home after I first suspected something was wrong. The cameras had captured everything. James and his mistress, Vanessa, planning how they forced me out. Their careful schemes about hiding assets, their discussions about making me seem unstable to gain an advantage in the divorce. She'll never fight back, Vanessa had said in one clip, lounging on my couch while I was supposedly at my sister's house. James says she's too afraid of confrontation. They'd underestimated me. Badly. Another text from James. Delete those videos now. You're violating our privacy. I smiled, remembering all those nights I'd spent cataloging their conversations, building my case while they thought I was oblivious. James had always treated me like I was naive, too trusting. He never realized that trust and stupidity aren't the same thing. The next morning, I walked into our kitchen to find James waiting, his face flushed with anger. Gone was the confident man who'd threatened me via text just hours ago. In his place stood someone who finally realized he wasn't in control. What do you want? He demanded, his voice hoarse. I poured myself a cup of coffee, taking my time to respond. I want what's fair, James. Nothing more, nothing less. Those recordings won't hold up in court, he said, but his voice wavered. My lawyer says. Your lawyer hasn't seen them yet, I interrupted calmly, but mine has. Along with the offshore account statements, the property transfers to Vanessa's name, and the correspondence with your banker about hiding our joint assets. His face went pale. How did you find out? I'm not the helpless housewife you and Vanessa think I am. I've known about your affair for a year. I've watched you plan, scheme, and lie. I've documented everything. She's different, James said, his voice softening. She understands me. We're in love. I couldn't help but laugh. Love? Is that what you call plotting to leave your wife destitute? Planning to claim I'm mentally unstable so you can take everything we've built together? He slumped into a chair, the fight draining from him. What do you want? He repeated. I want a fair division of assets. I want the house you promised Vanessa she could redecorate. I want half of everything you tried to hide. I took another sip of coffee, and I want you to remember something, James. You didn't marry a fool. You married a woman who loved you enough to trust you, but was smart enough to protect herself. My phone buzzed again. Vanessa this time. I showed James the screen, where she was demanding he handle me before I ruined everything. Her messages grew increasingly frantic as he didn't respond. She's 23, James, I said softly. Did you really think she wanted you for your charm? Or was it the lifestyle you promised her, the lifestyle you planned to steal from me? He buried his face in his hands, and for a moment I saw the man I'd married 15 years ago. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who'd rather threaten and scheme than face the consequences of his actions. I'll have my lawyer send over the revised divorce agreement today, I said, standing up. One that reflects a fair division of everything. All the properties, accounts, and investments, including the ones you thought I didn't know about. As I walked out of the kitchen, James called after me, How long have you been planning this? I turned back, meeting his eyes. Since the day you started planning against me. The difference is, I did it to protect myself. You did it to destroy me. Remember that when you're signing the papers. The look on his face told me he finally understood. He hadn't married someone he could bully into submission. He'd married someone who knew her worth and had proof to back it up. Part 1 ends with me walking away, leaving James to face the reality that his carefully constructed plan had crumbled. His phone kept buzzing with Vanessa's messages, but we both knew everything had changed. The next few weeks would reshape both our lives, but only one of us was prepared for what was coming. The next few days unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. James moved out, taking only his personal belongings after my lawyer made it clear that removing anything else would result in immediate legal action. The security cameras captured him explaining to Vanessa in our driveway why they couldn't start moving her things in as planned. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, loud enough for the cameras to pick up. "You promised me this house. You said she'd be too scared to fight back." I watched the footage later that evening, noting how James seemed to age years in just days. The confident man who threatened me via text was replaced by someone who jumped at every email notification, wondering what else I might reveal. My lawyer, Diana, called with an update. James' attorney reached out, she said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. "They want to discuss a settlement." "I'm sure they do," I replied, thinking of the videos I hadn't sent yet. The ones showing James and Vanessa discussing how they claim I was unstable, planning to use my grief over my mother's recent death against me in court. "They're offering a 60-40 split in his favor," Diana continued. "Should I tell them where to stick that offer?" "No," I said, surprising myself with my calmness. "Tell them we'll meet. I want to see their faces when we play the rest of the recordings." The meeting was set for the following week. I spent the intervening days organizing more evidence, bank statements showing suspicious transfers, text messages James thought he deleted but had backed up to our shared cloud account, photos of him and Vanessa using our vacation home when I was supposedly there alone. My sister Kate came over the night before the meeting, bringing wine and her signature straight-talking support. "How are you really doing?" she asked, studying my face carefully. I considered the question while sipping my wine. "Honestly, I'm angry. Not about the affair, that's on him. I'm angry that he thought so little of me, that he and his girlfriend sat in my home plotting to destroy me. And now I'm ready to show them exactly who they underestimated." The settlement meeting was held in Diana's office. James arrived with his lawyer and, surprisingly, Vanessa. She perched beside him in designer clothes I suspected were purchased with money from our accounts. "Before we begin," James's lawyer started, "my client is willing to be generous despite the unconventional surveillance methods used." Diana smiled, opening her laptop. Interesting choice of words. "Before discussing generosity, let's review some footage from last month." The color drained from James's face as Diana played a video of him and Vanessa in our home office, going through my personal files. "The insurance policy has to be here somewhere," James was saying in the footage. "Once we have that, we can start building the case about her mental state." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her seat as her voice filled the room. "What if she fights back? She seems different lately, more confident." "She won't," James had assured her. "She's too afraid of being alone. Trust me, I know how to handle her." Diana paused the video. "There's more. Hours more. Should we continue?" James' lawyer cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss a more equitable distribution of assets." "Perhaps we should," Diana agreed, pulling out a thick folder. "Let's start with the offshore accounts, specifically the one in the Caymans where Mr. Harrison has been transferring joint funds." I watched as James's carefully constructed world continued to crumble. Vanessa's designer heel tapped nervously against the floor as Diana methodically laid out every scheme, every plan, every betrayal. "A 50-50 split of all assets," Diana stated firmly. "The house goes to my client, and Mr. Harrison will retract any statements suggesting mental instability on Mrs. Harrison's part." "And if I refuse?" James asked, but his voice lacked conviction. I spoke for the first time since the meeting began. "Then we go to court, and I play these videos for everyone to see. Your colleagues, your friends, your family. Everyone will know exactly what kind of man you are." Vanessa stood up abruptly. "This is insane. James, you promised me." "Sit down," James hissed, but she was already heading for the door. "You said this would be easy," she shouted. "You said she was weak." The door slammed behind her, leaving a heavy silence in the room. I met James's eyes across the table. "Sign the papers," I said quietly. "End this now, and those videos stay private. Drag this out, and I'll make sure everyone knows the truth." His lawyer whispered something in his ear, and James nodded slowly, reaching for the pen. As he signed, I realized this wasn't the victory I'd imagined during those long nights of collecting evidence. It felt more like the end of a long illness, painful but necessary for healing to begin. Part 2 ends with James signing the papers, his hand trembling slightly. The man who threatened me just days ago now couldn't even meet my eyes. As I walked out of Diana's office, I heard Vanessa's angry voice in the hallway, demanding explanations James couldn't give. But for the first time since discovering the betrayal, none of it mattered. I was free. 6 months after the settlement meeting, I stood in my newly renovated kitchen, sipping morning coffee and watching the sunrise. The house felt different now, lighter, peaceful. I'd repainted every room, replaced the furniture they plotted on, and transformed the space into something entirely my own. The last box of James' remaining items sat by the door, ready for his sister to collect. I hadn't seen him since the settlement, though I'd heard plenty through the grapevine. Vanessa had left him 3 weeks after the meeting, once she realized the lifestyle he promised her wasn't materializing. She'd moved on to someone else, someone whose promises she hadn't yet learned to doubt. My phone buzzed with a text from Kate. "Have you seen the email?" I hadn't checked my personal email yet, but when I did, I understood her message. James had sent a lengthy apology, the kind that comes after months of reflection and regret. "I know it's too late," he wrote, "but I'm sorry for everything. Not just the affair or the divorce, but for underestimating you, for thinking I could bully and threaten you into giving up what was rightfully yours. You deserve better." I deleted the email without responding. His apology might have been sincere, but it wasn't something I needed anymore. My healing hadn't depended on his remorse. Later that afternoon, I met Kate for lunch at our favorite cafe. She'd been my rock through everything, and now she was helping me plan my future. "So the house in Provence?" she asked, grinning over her salad. "Have you decided?" I smiled, pulling out my tablet to show her the listing. The small villa I found would be perfect for the writing retreat I'd always dreamed of running. James had laughed at that dream, called it impractical. Now, with my share of our assets and newfound freedom, it was becoming reality. "I'm making an offer tomorrow," I said. "The realtor says it's perfect for small groups, and the advance bookings are already coming in." "Look at you," Kate beamed. "From collecting evidence to collecting dreams, I'm so proud of you." "I learned something through all this," I said, thinking back to those dark days of discovery and planning. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead us to our best decisions. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a call from Diana. "Just wanted to let you know," she said when I answered. "James, the lawyer, reached out. He's contesting the offshore account split." I felt a calm settle over me, the same calm I felt when responding to his threatening text all those months ago. "Send him the video from March 15th, I replied. "The one where he and Vanessa discuss hiding those specific accounts." Diana chuckled. "Already done. I don't expect we'll hear any more protests." After lunch, I walked through the park where James and I used to spend Sunday afternoons. The autumn leaves were turning, painting the world in warm golds and reds. A year ago, I'd walked this same path in tears, having just discovered his affair. Now, I walked it with purpose, my head held high. My phone buzzed again, a message from James. "My lawyer says to drop the contest. You really did think of everything, didn't you?" I thought about responding but decided against it. The time for conversations between us had passed. Instead, I opened my laptop at a nearby cafe and finalized my offer on the Provence villa. That evening, as I sorted through old photos for my upcoming memoir writing workshop, I found our wedding picture. We looked so young, so hopeful. I didn't feel sadness looking at it anymore, just appreciation for the journey that had brought me here. Kate called as I was making dinner. "James's sister picked up his box," she reported. "She said he's moving out of state. Apparently, his reputation here is pretty much destroyed." "That's not my problem anymore," I replied, and I meant it. The truth was, I didn't need to see James face consequences or hear his apologies. His betrayal had taught me something invaluable, that I was stronger than anyone, including myself, had believed. Every scheme he and Vanessa had plotted had pushed me to think smarter, plan better, and value myself more. As I finished my dinner on the patio, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, I felt profound gratitude. Not for the pain or betrayal, but for the woman I'd become because of it. The one who didn't just survive threats and manipulation, but who turned them into stepping stones toward a better life. My phone lit up with a confirmation email. My offer on the villa had been accepted. In the reflection of the glass doors, I saw myself smile, and it reached my eyes. James had threatened to make me regret ever meeting him, but instead, he'd made me grateful for finding my own strength. Sometimes the best revenge isn't in the evidence you collect or the battles you win, but in the life you build from the ashes of betrayal. Mine was just beginning, and it was more beautiful than I'd ever imagined. It's for your own good, Linda. This amateur work would embarrass our family name at the Heritage Festival, my mother-in-law Margaret declared, her scissors slicing through what she thought was my grandmother's cherished quilt. I stood in her craft room, watching as she butchered the fabric with her improvements, each cut making my heart race, not from distress, but from the effort of hiding my smile. My name is Linda Parker, and at 34, I've spent the last decade perfecting the art of dealing with Margaret Wells, the self-proclaimed queen of the local quilting society. She'd never forgiven me for stealing her precious son David away from the wealthy socialite she handpicked for him. The fact that David and I fell in love while restoring vintage motorcycles, another hobby she deemed unsuitable for a Wells, only added fuel to her disapproval. The festival judges expect perfection. Margaret continued, her perfectly manicured nails tracing over the quilt's surface. These primitive stitches would never win. Really, Linda, if your grandmother was any good at quilting, why didn't she ever enter competitions? I bit my tongue, remembering Grandma Rose's words. Sometimes, sweetheart, the best victory is the one only you know about. My grandmother had been my rock, raising me after my parents' accident when I was 12. She taught me everything: cooking, gardening, and most importantly, the art of quilting. But not just any quilting. Rose Mitchell had a secret technique, one passed down through generations of women in our family. You're right, Margaret, I said softly, watching her pause mid-cut, clearly surprised by my easy agreement. Grandma never did enter any competitions. What I didn't mention was that Rose Mitchell's quilts were actually highly sought after by collectors who recognized her unique signature pattern. A subtle, almost invisible variation in the stitching that made her quilts not just beautiful, but valuable pieces of folk art. Only a handful of her quilts existed, and fewer still had her special pattern. Margaret's eyes narrowed at my compliance. She was used to our subtle battles, my quiet resistance to her attempts to improve everything about me. Well, she said, clearly thrown off balance, I'm glad you're finally seeing reason. This pattern is outdated, the stitching is uneven, and honestly, the color choices are questionable at best. I nodded, picking up a piece of the fabric she'd discarded. The quilt she was destroying was actually a clever replica I'd made specifically for this moment. After years of Margaret's not-so-subtle hints about fixing my grandmother's work, I prepared for the inevitable. The real heirloom was safely stored in a climate-controlled unit across town, along with Grandma's other precious pieces. The Heritage Festival is in 3 days, Margaret announced, pulling out her own expensive fabrics. I'll rework this into something presentable. The Wells family has won the quilting competition for the past 5 years, and I won't let that streak end because of inferior materials. I watched as she began laying out her design, all sharp angles and modern patterns, nothing like the intricate flowing designs my grandmother had created. Margaret's quilts were technically perfect, machine precise, and utterly soulless. She'd never understood that quilting wasn't just about perfect stitches, it was about telling a story through fabric and thread. Would you like help? I offered, knowing her answer before she spoke. Oh no, dear, she said with false sweetness. Why don't you focus on the bake sale instead? Simple things are more your speed. I left her craft room, my phone buzzing with a text from David. Mom's still improving things. My husband knew all about his mother's attempts to remake me into her idea of a proper Wells wife. He'd offered to intervene countless times, but I'd always declined. Some battles were worth fighting quietly. Just fixing Grandma's quilt, I texted back. Everything's going according to plan. Later that evening, as Margaret proudly showed off her progress to David and his father George, I slipped away to my craft room. Hidden behind panels of fabric samples and sewing supplies was a small safe. Inside lay my real entry for the Heritage Festival, a quilt I'd spent the past year creating, incorporating every technique my grandmother had taught me. The pattern seemed simple at first glance, a traditional tree of life design rendered in subtle shades of blue, green, and gold. But within the pattern, visible only to those who knew where to look, was Rose Mitchell's signature technique. Each stitch told a story, creating a secondary pattern that emerged only when the light hit it just right. It was more than a quilt. It was a piece of my history, my grandmother's legacy woven into every careful stitch. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Susan, the Heritage Festival's head judge. Everything set for Friday, your grandmother would be proud. I smiled, remembering the last conversation I'd had with Grandma Rose before she passed away 2 years ago. She'd made me promise to keep our family's quilting tradition alive, but to do it my way. Patience and precision, dear, she'd said, her hands shaking but still able to demonstrate the special stitch one last time. Those who know will know. Margaret's voice carried down the hallway, discussing her plans to display her improved version of my family quilt. It'll be a surprise for everyone, she declared. No one will expect such a modern take on a traditional pattern. Linda will thank me when we win. I closed my safe quietly, touching the simple gold locket I always wore, the one containing a small piece of my grandmother's first quilt. Oh, Margaret, I whispered to myself, you have no idea how right you are about the surprises in store at the festival. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Margaret worked feverishly on her improvement project, completely transforming what she thought was my family heirloom into something unrecognizable. I kept myself busy helping with festival preparations, setting up display areas, and carefully avoiding any mention of quilts or competitions. The evening before the festival, as I carefully packed my real entry away, David came into our room. Mom's finally finished, he said, running a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. She wants everyone to see it at breakfast tomorrow before we head to the festival. I leaned into his embrace, feeling the rumble of his laugh. You're really going to let her show that thing to everyone? Sometimes, I said, echoing my grandmother's wisdom, the best lessons come from letting people believe they've won. David kissed the top of my head. Rose Mitchell's granddaughter through and through. Mom has no idea what's coming, does she? I smiled, thinking of the judges' faces when they'd seen my test pieces of the quiet arrangements we'd made for the festival's special exhibition. Let's just say the Heritage Festival is going to be very interesting this year. The morning of the Heritage Festival dawned bright and clear. I sat at Margaret's immaculate dining room table, watching her unveil her masterpiece to the family. The quilt she created from the remnants of my decoy was exactly what I'd expected, technically perfect and completely devoid of character. Notice how I've modernized the dated pattern, Margaret explained, gesturing to the sharp geometric shapes she'd incorporated. The judges will appreciate the innovation. It's a perfect blend of traditional and contemporary. She paused, fixing me with a pointed look. Much better than the original, don't you think, Linda? David squeezed my hand under the table as I nodded pleasantly. It's certainly different, I replied, causing my father-in-law George to hide a smile behind his coffee cup. Unlike his wife, George had always treated me with quiet kindness. He even confided once that I reminded him of his own mother, who had also preferred working with her hands to attending social functions. Different. Margaret's eyes narrowed. It's exceptional. The Wells family has a reputation to uphold at the festival. We can't have subpar work associated with our name. I thought about my own quilt, carefully packed away in its acid-free box. Grandma Rose had always said that true craftsmanship speaks for itself. No need for grand announcements or self-promotion. The quality of the work would always shine through to those who understood it. The Heritage Festival was already bustling when we arrived. The town square had been transformed with white tents and colorful banners, the air filled with the scent of kettle corn and the sound of bluegrass music. Margaret immediately commandeered several volunteers to help her set up her display, positioning her quilt prominently in the center of the Wells family booth. Linda, she called out, make yourself useful and hand out these promotional cards. People should know where this piece came from. The cards, I noticed, made no mention of my grandmother's original work, crediting only Margaret Wells for the design. Actually, I said, checking my phone, I'm needed at the registration tent. They're short-handed this morning. Before Margaret could protest, I slipped away through the crowd. Instead of heading to registration, I made my way to a small tent at the far end of the square. Susan, the head judge, was waiting for me. Everything's ready, she said, helping me unpack my quilt. The special exhibition space is prepared exactly as we discussed. We carefully hung my piece, adjusting the lighting until it was perfect. In the proper light, my grandmother's signature pattern emerged, subtle variations in the stitching that created a secondary design, visible only to those who knew what to look for. It was like a secret language passed down through generations of women in my family. Rose would be so proud, Susan murmured, stepping back to admire the work. I remember when she taught at the college's textile program. None of us could ever quite figure out how she achieved this effect. I smiled, remembering countless hours spent practicing with my grandmother, her patient hands guiding mine through the complex stitching pattern. It took me years to master it, I admitted. Every time I thought I had it, she'd show me something new, some tiny detail I'd missed. Back at the main exhibition area, Margaret was holding court, describing her innovative techniques to a group of polite listeners. I caught David's eye and winked, our signal that everything was in place. The judging began at noon. Margaret stood proudly by her display, confident in her inevitable victory. I watched as the judges made their rounds, taking notes and examining each entry carefully. When they reached Margaret's quilt, she launched into her prepared speech about modernizing traditional patterns. "And where did the original design come from?" one judge asked, adjusting her glasses. "Oh, it was just an old family piece," Margaret said dismissively. "Quite primitive, really. I saw the potential and gave it the refinement it needed." The judge made a non-committal noise and moved on, leaving Margaret slightly flustered. This wasn't following her usual script of effusive praise and immediate recognition. At 2 o'clock, Susan took the stage for the special announcement we planned. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice rang out over the festival grounds, "this year we have a unique privilege. Many of you may remember Rose Mitchell, whose quilts were legendary in our community." I saw Margaret's head snap up at the mention of my grandmother's name. "We're honored to present a special exhibition of Rose Mitchell's work, including a never-before-seen piece that demonstrates her famous hidden pattern technique." Susan paused, letting the murmur of excitement ripple through the crowd. "Even more special, this new work comes from her granddaughter, who has mastered Rose's unique method." The crowd began moving toward the small tent, Margaret among them, her face a mix of confusion and disbelief. I stayed back, watching as people filed in to view my quilt. From where I stood, I could hear the gasps of recognition from those who had known my grandmother's work, the excited whispers as they pointed out the subtle pattern emerging in the light. "It can't be," I heard Margaret say, her voice carrying over the crowd. "Linda doesn't. She couldn't." But I could and I had. Years of patience, practice, and quiet determination had led to this moment, not for revenge or triumph, but for honor. Honor of my grandmother's legacy, her art, and her wisdom. David appeared at my side, slipping an arm around my waist. "Should we go in?" he asked softly. I leaned into his embrace, watching as Margaret stood frozen before my quilt, her carefully constructed world of superiority crumbling around her. "Not yet," I said. "Let's give her a moment to process it all." Through the tent's opening, I could see my quilt catching the afternoon light, the hidden pattern shimmering like a secret finally revealed. Grandma Rose had always said that the best lessons come when we least expect them, and that true art speaks to the heart without needing to raise its voice. I touched my locket, feeling the small piece of my grandmother's first quilt safely tucked inside. Somewhere, I knew she was watching, and I hoped she was proud of how I'd chosen to reveal her legacy, not with anger or confrontation, but with the quiet confidence she had always taught me to embrace. The afternoon light filtered through the festival tents as I finally made my way to the special exhibition space. Margaret stood there, still staring at my quilt, her face a complex mixture of emotions. For once, she seemed at a loss for words. "The secret is in the tension of each stitch," I said quietly, moving to stand beside her. Grandma Rose spent years perfecting it. She said the trick was knowing exactly how much pressure to apply. Too much, and the pattern becomes obvious. Too little, and it disappears completely. Margaret turned to me, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw something different in her eyes. Not judgment or criticism, but a glimmer of understanding. "The one I modified," she said hesitantly. "It wasn't the real one, was it?" I shook my head. "No, I knew how much you wanted to improve my grandmother's work, so I made a replica. The original is safe, along with her other pieces." "Why did you ever say anything about your skills, about Rose's technique?" I thought carefully before answering. Grandma always said that true mastery doesn't need to announce itself. She taught me that sometimes the quietest voice carries the most weight. Susan approached us, her judge's clipboard in hand. Linda, would you mind explaining the technique to our visitors? We have quite a crowd gathering. For the next hour, I demonstrated the basics of the stitching pattern, carefully explaining how each element worked together to create the hidden design. Margaret stayed at the back of the group, watching intently as I worked. I could see her hands moving slightly, unconsciously mimicking the motions I was showing. Later, as the festival was winding down and the awards were being announced, Margaret approached me again. She held her honorable mention ribbon, twisting it between her fingers. I've been thinking, she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Your grandmother, she taught at the college? Yes, in the textile arts program. She loved sharing her knowledge with anyone who wanted to learn. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Do you teach? The question caught me off guard. Sometimes. Small groups usually, people who are interested in traditional techniques. Would you consider, she paused, seeming to struggle with the words. Would you consider teaching me? The real way, I mean, not just the surface level stuff I've been doing. I studied my mother-in-law's face, seeing past the perfect makeup and carefully maintained exterior to something vulnerable underneath. It's not easy, I warned. It takes patience, practice, and a willingness to make mistakes. I know, she said quietly, but I think it's time I learned. David found us sitting together at my demonstration table, where I was showing Margaret the basic framework of my grandmother's technique. He raised his eyebrows in surprise but smiled warmly. Mom, he said, they're asking for all the winners to gather for photos. Margaret looked at her honorable mention ribbon, then at my best in show award. You go ahead, Linda. You earned it. Actually, I said, standing up, why don't you come with me? We can talk more about those lessons afterward. As we walked together toward the photography area, I touched the locket at my neck, thinking of Grandma Rose. She'd always insisted that the true value of any skill lay not in keeping it to yourself, but in sharing it with others, even those who might have once dismissed it. The festival ended as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the town square. As we packed up our quilts and displays, Margaret helped me carefully fold my winning piece. You know, she said, smoothing the fabric with unexpected gentleness, I always wondered why Rose Mitchell never entered competitions. Now I understand. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I smiled, remembering my grandmother's quiet confidence. She used to say that competitions were just one way to measure success. The real achievement was in creating something that would last, something that would tell our stories long after we're gone. That evening, as David and I drove home, he reached over and squeezed my hand. You've changed something in her, you know. I've never seen Mom willing to admit she has something to learn. I thought about Margaret's requests for lessons, about the genuine interest I'd seen in her eyes as I demonstrated the stitching technique. Sometimes people just need to be shown a different way of seeing things. The next morning, I received a text from Margaret. When can we start the lessons? I smiled as I typed my reply, thinking of Grandma Rose and her patient teachings. Some traditions weren't meant to be modernized or improved, but rather preserved and passed on with love and understanding. As I set up my sewing room for Margaret's first lesson, I knew that while the stitches might not be perfect at first, we were creating something more valuable than just another quilt. We were stitching together a new chapter in our family's story. And somewhere, I was sure, Grandma Rose was smiling. Just accept it and move on. You're too weak to fight back anyway. Jessica's mocking laughter echoed through the living room as she lounged on my couch, casually sipping the wine I'd bought for my anniversary. An anniversary I now knew my husband had planned to spend with someone else. My name is Olivia, and at 35, I never expected to be standing in my own home, listening to my sister-in-law mock me while my husband David announced his plans to start a new life with his 26-year-old girlfriend. Look, Olivia, David said, pacing near the fireplace where our family photos still hung. This doesn't have to be messy. Sarah and I want to keep things simple. No legal registration, no property division. You can stay in the house for now, and everyone wins. I stood there, gripping my coffee mug so tight my knuckles turned white. 6 years of marriage, and this was how it ended, with my husband and his mistress planning their future while my SIL watched the show with barely concealed glee. She's not even crying, Jessica Stage whispered to David. Maybe she doesn't care as much as you thought she would, brother. Her smirk grew wider as she examined her perfectly manicured nails. Or maybe she's finally accepting that she's not enough for you. I took a slow sip of my now cold coffee, my mind racing beneath my calm exterior. David had always been the perfect one in his family's eyes. Successful architect, charming personality, and according to his sister Jessica, far too good for plain, quiet me. What they never realized was that being underestimated had taught me patience, and patience had taught me wisdom. Well, David demanded, clearly unsettled by my silence. Aren't you going to say anything? I set my mug down carefully on the coffee table. What would you like me to say, David? Jessica laughed again, the sound grating against my nerves. Oh, this is rich. She's actually going to play the dignified wife. How pathetic. But I wasn't playing. I was remembering the late nights I'd spent helping David build his portfolio when we first married, the clients I'd helped him network with through my own connections, and most importantly, the documents I carefully preserved over the years. I understand, I said simply, meeting David's eyes. You want to start fresh with Sarah. No legal ties, no complications. David's shoulders relaxed visibly. Exactly. I knew you'd be reasonable about this. You always were the practical one. Too practical, Jessica chimed in. That's probably why David got bored. Sarah at least knows how to have fun. I watched as David grabbed his jacket, ready to leave for his dinner date with Sarah. I'll send someone to pick up my things tomorrow, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. We can sort out the details later. As they walked toward the door, Jessica turned back with one final jab. You know, Olivia, some women would fight for their marriage. But I guess you're just not that type, are you? I smiled softly, thinking of the locked drawer in my home office upstairs. You're right, Jessica. I'm not that type at all. After they left, I walked upstairs to my office, my hands steady as I unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside lay 6 years' worth of carefully documented evidence, emails, bank statements, contracts with David's signature, and most importantly, proof of how deeply involved I've been in building his successful architecture firm. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Don't embarrass yourself by trying to fight this. We both know you're not strong enough. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and composed a quick email to my old college friend, now a prominent divorce attorney. Remember when you told me to document everything? I need your help. Looking out my office window at the setting sun, I thought about David's words. No legal registration, no property division. He thought he found the perfect way to start his new life without consequences. Jessica thought I was too weak to stand up for myself. They were both about to learn that quiet doesn't mean weak, and patience doesn't mean acceptance. I had spent years being underestimated by David's family, watching and waiting, documenting and preparing. Not because I expected this day to come, but because my mother had taught me that smart women always have a backup plan. I picked up my phone and dialed another number. Hi, Marcus. Remember those investment documents you helped me review last year? I think it's time to put our contingency plan into action. The wheels were already turning, and soon David and Jessica would learn that they had greatly underestimated the quiet, practical wife who never fought back. Sometimes the best revenge isn't in the fighting, it's in the waiting. 2 weeks after David's announcement, I sat in my lawyer's office, surrounded by stacks of meticulously organized documents. Maya, my attorney and college friend, whistled as she flipped through the files. Olivia, this is incredible, she said, shaking her head in amazement. You have records of every contribution you made to David's firm, every client you brought in, every late-night revision you helped with, and these investment records. I nodded, thinking back to all those nights I'd spent organizing and backing up documents while David worked late, allegedly at the office. I learned early in our marriage that David's family only respected power. I figured having proof of my contributions might come in handy someday. Maya leaned back in her chair. Your husband thinks he can avoid property division by not legally registering his new relationship. But with these records, we can prove your substantial contribution to his firm's success. He'll have to properly divide assets whether he likes it or not. Just then, my phone buzzed with another taunting text from Jessica. David and Sarah looked so happy at dinner last night. This is what real love looks like, not your sad excuse for a marriage. I showed Maya the text, and she smiled grimly. Your SIL really enjoys pushing your buttons, doesn't she? She's been doing it for 6 years, I replied, always implying I wasn't good enough for David, that I was lucky to have him. She has no idea I've saved every nasty message, every email where she belittled me. Maya's eyes gleamed. Actually, those messages could work in our favor. They show a pattern of emotional harassment and combined with these financial records. A knock at the door interrupted us. Marcus, my financial advisor, entered with his own stack of papers. Ladies, wait until you see this. Those private investments David made last year, the ones he didn't want Olivia to know about, they were made using company funds that Olivia helped secure through her client connections. I remember discovering those transactions during one of my regular reviews of our joint accounts. Instead of confronting David, I had quietly documented everything and consulted Marcus about protecting my interests. So not only did he use company money for personal investments, Maya said slowly, but he did it with funds that Olivia helped bring in. This gets better and better. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from David. Sarah and I are planning to move into the lake house next month. I trust you'll handle the cleanup before we arrive. The lake house, our weekend getaway that I had found, negotiated, and partially funded with my inheritance. David had conveniently forgotten that part. They want the lake house too, I told Maya, showing her the message. She actually laughed. The lake house that's partially in your name? The one you found and helped purchase? Let them try. Just then, Jessica burst into the office, her face flushed with anger. What do you think you're doing? She demanded. David told me you're meeting with lawyers. Are you really going to be this petty? I remained seated, calm as ever. Hello, Jessica. I'm just having a chat with some old friends. Friends? She sneered, looking at Maya and Marcus. More like you're trying to cause trouble. David's finally happy. Why can't you just let him go? Maya stood up, her professional demeanor firmly in place. Ms. Thompson, this is a private meeting. Unless you're here as your brother's legal representative, I'm here to tell Olivia to stop this nonsense. Jessica snapped. She's just proving what I've always said. She's not good enough for our family. A truly loving wife would want David's happiness. I finally stood, gathering my documents calmly. You're right, Jessica. A loving wife would want her husband's happiness. But a smart wife? I held up one of the folders. A smart wife makes sure she's protected. Jessica's face paled slightly as she glimpsed the labeled tabs, investment records, client contributions, property documents, harassment evidence. You've been planning this? She stammered. No, Jessica, I've been preparing. There's a difference. I turned to Maya. I think we have everything we need for now. As Jessica stormed out, Marcus checked his phone and smiled. The preliminary audit of the firm's accounts is complete. Should I share the findings with David's partners? I nodded, thinking of all the times David had dismissed my suggestions about financial transparency in his firm. Yes, I think it's time they knew exactly how their money has been managed. The wheels were in motion now, and soon David and his family would learn that their practical weak Olivia had been anything but. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should watch most carefully. 1 month later, I sat in the conference room of David's architecture firm, watching his perfect world crumble. The board members had called an emergency meeting after Marcus's audit revealed David's misuse of company funds. His partners' faces were grim as they reviewed the evidence I provided. So not only did you make unauthorized investments with company money, the senior partner stated, glaring at David, but you also plan to give away company assets, including the lake house property, which was partially purchased with firm funds without board approval. David's face had lost its usual confidence. I can explain. These were temporary arrangements. Temporary? Another partner interrupted. Like the temporary clients Mrs. Chen brought to the firm. The ones who now make up 30% of our annual revenue? I kept my expression neutral, though inside I felt a flutter of satisfaction. They'd finally used my maiden name, not just David's wife anymore. Jessica burst into the room, waving her phone. This is all her fault, she shouted, pointing at me. She's trying to ruin David's life because she can't accept that he found someone better. The senior partner raised an eyebrow. Ms. Thompson, this is a private board meeting. Security will escort you out. As Jessica was led away, still shouting Sarah, David's girlfriend, texted him. Is it true? Are we losing the lake house? You promised me a perfect life. I watched David's face fall as he read the message, His perfect escape plan was dissolving before his eyes. The board has reached a decision, the senior partner announced. Given the circumstances, we're initiating a complete restructuring. Mr. Thompson, you'll be stepping down as managing partner, effective immediately. David slumped in his chair. You can't do this. I built this firm. Actually, I spoke for the first time, my voice steady. We built it together. Every late night, every client meeting, every revision. I was there. I just never needed the credit, until now. The meeting ended with David's resignation. Outside the conference room, he grabbed my arm. Why are you doing this? I was going to take care of you. I gently removed his hand. No, David. You were going to discard me. There's a difference. That evening, as I packed the last of David's things from our house, Jessica showed up one final time. You've destroyed everything, she said, but her voice had lost its edge. Our family's reputation, David's career. No, Jessica. Your brother did that himself. I just showed everyone the truth. She stared at me for a long moment. I never thought you had it in you. All these years I thought you were weak, pathetic, too practical. I smiled. Sometimes the quiet ones surprise you. 3 months after David's announcement of his simple plan, I stood in my newly redecorated living room. The family photos were gone, replaced by artwork I'd always loved but David had deemed too bold. The investment money had been recovered, the lake house was legally mine, and David's firm had offered me a consulting position, which I politely declined. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Final divorce papers signed. Property division complete. You're officially free. I poured myself a glass of wine, the same expensive brand Jessica had carelessly sipped while mocking me. Another message came through, this time from David. I understand now. I'm sorry. Too little too late. Looking out at the sunset through my window, I thought about the lesson my mother had taught me years ago. Never let them see your strength until you need to use it. The power of being underestimated is that no one sees you coming. I raised my glass in a silent toast to the quiet, practical wife who had proven stronger than anyone expected. Sometimes the best revenge isn't in fighting back immediately. It's in waiting, watching, and choosing the perfect moment to show your true strength. The doorbell rang. Outside stood Sarah, looking uncomfortable. I didn't know, she stammered. About the firm, about the money, about any of it. I thought. You thought you found your perfect ending. I finished for her. Life's rarely that simple. As I closed the door on David's past and my own, I smiled, thinking of Jessica's words from that first day. Just accept it and move on. I had accepted it, accepted that I deserved better, and I had moved on, just not in the way they'd expected. Sometimes the strongest response isn't in the shouting, but in the silence. And sometimes the person they call weak turns out to be the strongest of them all.